This video is sponsored by Absolute Truth Accounting. Drafting starting from 2,500 Rand, compilation starting from 3,000 Rand, and independent review starting from 5,000 Rand. Contact us on our direct line, which is 060-187-0680, or our email address, which is absolutetruthaccounting@gmail.com. Thanks. Peace. Shine in the Light, Chapter 8. So what does it matter now if the Hindu scriptures are saying the true nature of reality is consciousness, existence, and bliss, and the Western interpretation, they don't have an understanding of what consciousness is, and they also don't have there's still a theoretical basis on what, how life began and, what the true nature of the universe is. It's up for debate with them. Now the Hindu scriptures is saying that it's actually consciousness what's the true nature of reality. And through the four ways of Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga, only through those four ways can you truly experience that that's the true nature of reality, right? It says if you don't experience consciousness firsthand as the true nature of reality through one of those four ways, then you ultimately will perceive life through what you have come to know it as, whether it be what you learned in school, what you learned from your parents, what you learned from society, what you learned from whatever material source you've came to know life as, and you what your agreement of life, what it is, that will be your reality. Not to say that consciousness is not the source of reality. You've just made an agreement with something else, like whether it be a religious perspective or a societal perspective, or all the agreements you've come to know life as will form part of your perceptive borders, right? And that will be your reality. Whatever you've conceived life to be, through all those facets of experience, that will form the makeup of your experience. Not to say that consciousness isn't true. That's just a modulation of consciousness. But if you go directly to the source through the four ways, that's the only way you can come to know that consciousness is true, the true nature of reality. Otherwise, your agreement of what life is in totality, whether it be family or what religion is or what your relationships are, that will be what your ultimate understanding of what life is. It won't be the direct notion of consciousness being the fabric of reality unless you engage in the four yogas, no matter how you do that. And how it proves its truth is it explains that when you truly experience these four yogas, that is only when you'll have a true sense of peace and fulfillment, is when you know that consciousness is the true reality, and how you will experience that consciousness is the true reality is by speculating about it or just purely acting out of service and not desiring any results from that. That's another way you will truly experience consciousness is the true reality. Through meditation, if you meditate, you will come to know firsthand that consciousness is the only reality. And if you have pure devotion just to God, and you don't want anything, there's no higher reality for you, not family, not religion, not relationships, not relationship with children, not relationship with race, country. Those are all identifications. Those are all human constructs that we've used to make sense of our reality. But the ultimate truth of this reality is that it came from consciousness. And if you don't live a life that's connected to the four yogas in whatever form that is, you will not have a true sense of fulfillment from this reality. And that's the ultimate meaning of what life is life came from consciousness, and that is the true nature of God. And once you align yourself with that reality through the 4 yogas, knowing that God is the ultimate, and you just have to live in alignment with His, of like, if you just have to live in alignment with how He's created the reality, and those are just living purely with faith to Him and with love to God, with like just service with no want of results or speculating about what God is. You'll ultimately come to know that it's just consciousness, or through meditation. And that means that when you know it through that mode, that will ultimately lead to your transcendence of this creation. And that's what we call moksha in Hinduism. It's because there's 4 facets of a Hindu's life, and that is dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So ultimately, you have to have an experience of life through doing your duty, and your conduct is your dharma, and then your artha is your acquisition of possessions. Let me just bring up dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Okay, dharma, artha. What is artha? This is the 4 goals of a human's life, as per the Vedic scriptures. Reload. Why isn't it working now? Come on. Okay. All right, here we go. Artha. Artha means Artha is one of the 4 goals of human life, Purusarthas, representing prosperity, security, material well-being, and the means needed for fulfilling life. So that's what Artha is. It's prosperity, right? Security, material well-being. So there's 4 goals of a human's life. It's dharma, which is, let me also pull up dharma. Let me pull up another tab here. Dharma. Okay. Seems too broad. Yeah, okay. So dharma, it says it refers to an individual's moral responsibilities or duties. So like I said, like your conduct. Then your artha is your material well-being. Material well-being representing prosperity, security, and the means needed for fulfilling life. That's artha. Then you have kama, which is not the same as karma. This is Kama. This is where the Kama Sutra comes from. Kama is the concept of desire and pleasure. And it says Kama is the representing desire, longing, and sensual or aesthetic enjoyment. But all in all, it means desire and pleasure. So dharma is your conduct. So all humans experience life through these 4 modes, right? Dharma, which is your conduct. Artha, which is your prosperity or material well-being. Kama is your pleasure, desire and pleasure. And then moksha is the transcendence of all of those experiences of life, let's say. Let's pull up what moksha is. Moksha. Okay, so moksha, it says, is the ultimate spiritual liberation from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, which is known as samsara. It's central to several Indian religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. It is considered the final goal of human existence, achieved by overcoming ignorance, desire, and the ego to realize one's true self, in brackets, Atman. and achieve eternal bliss and unity with the divine or universal consciousness, Brahman. Paths to moksha include living according to one's dharma, self-realization through knowledge and meditation, selfless service, and devotion to a deity. So, if in a human's life, right, if you do not find consciousness or being the central point or the focal point of your life in the four ways that it prescribes in the Hindu scriptures, then you will continuously need to have the experience of what this life is. You know, no matter what it's for, whatever you cling to the meaning of this life, whether it be family, religion, relationships. If you don't make consciousness the focal point, or God the focal point, then you won't escape the cycle of birth and death, because the ultimate reality is that this life is ultimately rooted in consciousness, existence, and bliss, and that has its roots in God. And what God is consciousness. So if you do not realize the nature of life being rooted in consciousness, and it's not a first-hand experience through the four ways prescribed in the Hindu scriptures, which they say in here is through meditation, selfless service, or devotion to a deity, or through knowledge. If you don't come through the understanding that everything is just built on consciousness, and the ultimate consciousness or collective consciousness is God, and that's what Brahman is. If you don't come to that realization, you will continuously be reborn in the cycle of birth and death, which is this universe. And until you know firsthand what the nature is, and that this universe is built on consciousness, you will continuously have this experience of this world and be born again and again, until you know for sure and you have the experience that this reality is just built on consciousness, and that's where God comes from. Then you will be released from the cycle of birth and death, and then you will achieve moksha. So that's what the ultimate end is to this conversation, is that God is ultimately everything, and you have to align yourself with that reality and not be deluded by life in its many forms, like family and like relationship with kids, and like your country and your race and your religion. All of that is just recycled information. If you know truly that life is born from God, and you ultimately devoted to that, and that it's this higher transcendental experience that you have to achieve through, like it says here, through knowledge or meditation or selfless service or devotion to God. That's the only way you can come to know this life ultimately. And if you don't connect to that, you will continue to have this experience. And to break free of this experience, you have to basically align yourself with the nature of reality, being consciousness, and that coming from God and it being centered in God. So that's what the point is of what the Gita means. And if you're not connected to what this ultimate reality is, then you will not be connected to what the true, reality of the universe is. And I guess that ultimately this life is centered around suffering. So it's centered around suffering for a reason, because there's a higher reality. This reality we have come to experience is not the end. There's a further reality once we pass away, and it centers around consciousness and how we are born from consciousness. And consciousness was never, there was not a before consciousness, and there's not an after consciousness. Consciousness always was. And you are that what consciousness is. So if you do not come to realize that, then you do not ultimately know what the true purpose of life is and who you are, where you will go after death, and what life actually came from and what it means. Then you will continuously have to make sense of this life through experience, and you will continuously be reborn. But until you know that life is ultimately born through consciousness, and that's what God is, and until you activate your spiritual connection to God through the 4 ways of service or devotion to Him, or gaining knowledge about it, about consciousness, or through meditation, you will continuously have this experience and you won't achieve moksha. And that's the point of the conversation, and that's the stark difference between the Western perspective of what the nature of reality is and what the Eastern perspective and what its view on the nature of reality is. And yeah, I guess that's the end of it. So I think I've explained everything that was, I've been trying to make sense of for the last, I think, like my whole life. And yeah, thanks. Shining the Light, Chapter 8. Peace.